This is Strictly Business, presented by the Greater Bakersfield Chamber of Commerce. Sponsored in part by the law offices of Young Wooldridge, San Joaquin Community Hospital. And now, here's your host, Cindy Pollard, President and CEO of the Greater Bakersfield Chamber of Commerce.
Welcome back. I am joined now by Jake Slayton, who is the Chief Operating Officer and a former banker, but he's currently the Chief Operating Officer of Goodwill Industries of South Central California. And Jake is joining us this morning to talk about cost allocations and profitability in a nonprofit. Good morning.
Good morning, Cindy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, nonprofits and profitability. People sometimes confuse the issue and believe that nonprofits can't make a profit. So let's start by clarifying that.
Sure. Nonprofits are, they're companies that serve a mission. That's why they get that non-profitability status. But some of the same business expenses and the same business needs that a for-profit company has, a nonprofit has as well. And that's why it's important to maintain profitability. That way you can maintain stability and your future growth.
So even though you have the tax-exempt status, it's still very important to run that business like it is a business.
Yeah, and especially for us at Goodwill, we have the same expenses a regular business has. We have stores, we have rent, we need loans to grow and all those things, and profit's a huge component of that.
Absolutely. Let's give a little bit more clarification for our viewers. So in a nonprofit, the revenue in excess of expenses can be retained if the carryover is not prohibited by the source of the funds.
Right.
And then restricted funds may only be used as the donor directs.
Correct.
And then where there are unrestricted funds, those can be used at the discretion of the board of directors, as long as its use furthers the mission.
Right.
So I guess the idea is not to always try to break even, but to increase your profitability so that you'll have more money to actually fulfill your mission.
Right. You have to have that balance between serving your mission and allocating the funds to do so and maintaining the stability of the company. Somewhere like Goodwill, we've been around for 100 years. We plan to be around another 100 years.
At least 100.
At least 100. So maintaining that profitability and maintaining those unrestricted funds in a healthy way is important to us.
Okay, so let's take a look at how organizations can increase their profitability. Sure. First of all, tell us, how do you measure profitability in a nonprofit? And then talk about some of the ways that it can be increased.
Well, how we measure profitability is much like any for-profit business would, especially at Goodwill. Most people know Goodwill. We have stores. You're going to go in there, so we have rent, power, and all those things. So if you looked at our balance sheet or our income statement more specifically, you would see just a traditional, revenues up top, expenses on bottom, interest expense, and all that, and have profitability at the end of it. It's what we kind of decide to do with that profitability. That's a little bit different. We want to be stable. We also want to serve our mission to our maximum ability. It's not only about profits, because there's no shareholders to throw some of those profits back to the community in a way is the shareholders.
Right. So what are some of the ways that organizations can increase their profitability? I mean, certainly taking a look at, you got to get more income and you've got to lower the expenses, I guess.
Right.
Other
than the basics, it's just having a clearly defined mission. Okay. The more clearly you can define your mission and say, this is what we're doing, the more you can kind of cut down on maybe some superfluous kind of expenses. You make sure you're very direct and very focused in what you do. That's the easiest way to kind of maintain. It gives you a clearer kind of line of sight to maintain that. Okay.
Now, we're talking about cost allocations being very important to this formula. Why is it important for nonprofits to review their cost allocations?
Well, for all nonprofits, we're a little bit different because we generate our revenue through stores, but we are all kind of competing for a smaller amount of donors. There's only so many dollars or donations to go out there. So people want to know, if I give a donation or I give either it's cash or in-kind donation to an organization, how much of that is hitting the bottom line? How much of that is really helping the programs and the things that I support? So it's very important.
How much is going to your mission?
Right. So it's very important when you allocate costs. You're raising something for a very specific program. You're allocating the right cost so the donor can see 90 cents on the dollar or whatever it is going to serve that mission. At Goodwill, we're a little bit different. The primary way we serve our mission is by giving people employment.
Right.
So ours is a little bit more in a traditional business sense, but allocating those costs right so people know exactly how much is being spent on what, because that's really the future, is that transparency to the donor.
Absolutely.
And I really believe that's the way to go. So if you looked at our income statement, for example, you would see not only the amount we spend on wages and salaries, which is a big component
Right.
of our mission, but also the amount we spend on other mission services and other things we do.
Okay, so really important for organizations to step back, take a
Right.
look at all of the costs and how they're allocated, and
Right.
sort of what's the formula, or is there a? It's
It-
going to vary a little
It's
bit.
going to vary. It's going to vary from organization to organization because some organizations, they do a once a year fundraiser that serves something very specific. They don't have the overhead that maybe a company like ours would have because we're running a traditional business. So I wouldn't say there's necessarily a formula, like a set formula. It's different for each one.
Okay.
But I think one of the things that's important is make sure you get yourself a good accountant. That way they can kind of measure you against, and they give you that experience. It's good to cultivate that kind of help around yourself.
Absolutely, as well as that type of accountability.
Right, absolutely.
So, what are some of the more common expenses that nonprofits will see, and how can they reduce those?
Well, a lot of nonprofits are going to see your major expenses are going to be your wages. Because whether it's an individual going out and providing a service, or as we do as you employ someone, those wages are going to be the most important. So you have to make sure that you are, allocating those correctly, looking at those correctly. Am I running a lean enough ship? And that goes back to being focused on your mission, knowing what your mission is. That way you're hiring the right amount of people to kind of serve it. So.
Okay. Yeah, I was reviewing some grant applications over the weekend, and there were a couple that stuck out because they said, they were all volunteer and their expenses were minimal, very, very minimal.
Right.
So in a situation like that, you have an opportunity. I mean, it looks like they're running lean,
Right.
As it is,
Right.
and allocating. They might take a look at alternative ways for maybe marketing their program, because I think in one of the grants that was noted as the biggest expense.
Yeah, I mean, especially on the smaller end of the nonprofit scale, you can rely. Luckily we live in Bakersfield where people want to be involved.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people will donate their time. A lot of people will donate things their businesses do to help out. And so some of those smaller places are able to kind of run that way. I'd be interested to see what it was, but it just depends. It's different. There's so many nonprofits because there's so many charities because there's so many issues.
Right.
And each issue, whether it's health or poverty or education, whatever it is, there's so many different ways to tackle it.
Right.
So they're all a little bit unique to each other.
Now, you just mentioned something that would be one way that an organization could reduce their expenses, and that would be through individuals or companies donating services or time or expertise to them. So if they don't have to pay for it, certainly that's a reduction in expenses as well. So having a large volunteer base and strategic volunteers, meaning that they're serving a particular area of need for you.
Yeah, I mean, I know I have quite a few lawyer friends who donate a lot of their time, especially a lot of their time to kind of youth-oriented programs, and these are guys that make good money, and they give up their time to do that. And I think if you cultivate the right network, it definitely helps out.
Absolutely. So, what are some of the hidden or overlooked expenses that organizations can find some room to cut?
There's some things to be aware of that I've found. The first is that generally when you're a nonprofit, you serve a certain area, so a geographic area, whether it's Kern County, in our case, Kern, Kings, and Southern Tulare County. You serve that area. Well, Kern County and our surrounding counties are as big as some states. I just got back from Atlanta. I think the Goodwill there serves like 40 counties. Well, you kind of trip and you fall through 3 or 4 counties. That's not how we work here.
Right.
So a lot of times, one of the things that people can do is they might have a service they're providing in one of the outlying areas, and they're driving back and forth which takes driving and focus and time. It might be better to open up, a regional office if you can, or have an employee out in those outlying areas who's dedicated to that, can provide better service, and the cost difference isn't going to be as much.
Right.
We live in a large area with a population center, but we still have a mandate. A lot of places have a mandate to serve the entire area. And
Right.
so there's some indirect costs with that.
Okay.
In our case, HR, driving out, things of that nature can if you're not aware of it, can kind of sneak up on you a bit.
Right. So if you find that you're being pulled more and more to provide service to a particular area,
Right.
might be time to review it a little bit more closely to see whether or not you just need to have a regular presence out there.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. How does budgeting and daily management, budgeting and daily management decisions affect cost allocations and profitability in the long run?
It's extremely important. Like I said earlier, we want to be around a long time. I think most nonprofits want to be around a long time. And when you're a nonprofit and you're serving a specific issue or mission, it's probably going to take several years and years on years and years of work to where you're really seeing the fruit of that labor. So making sure you're staying within your budget, and your budget provides for future growth. Your budget provides for, I'm saving a little bit today so I can spend it on X tomorrow,
Right.
is of the paramount importance. In fact, we're doing our whole budget right now, so believe me, it's been 2 months of conversations about where we're going and making sure that we're on the track with what our board has set through our strategic plan and hitting the numbers we want to hit. So
Fantastic. Any parting advice or guidance that you would give to
Sure.
nonprofits for increasing their profitability?
Right. I would say, and this is more for coming from a former banker, have a good relationship with your bank, have a good relationship with your accountants. Look for lawyers who have experience in these these fields. I've also, like you, reviewed grants. I've been helping in the community look at giving grants to other nonprofits. And one of the things I can tell you is having your numbers in order, because there are so few dollars, there are so few people out there donating in our particular area. You want to be clear, you want to be concise, you want to have a very well thought out mission, and you want to be as transparent as you can.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Great advice.
Appreciate it.
I'm Cindy Pollard with the Greater Bakersfield Chamber of Commerce. You're watching Strictly Business. We're going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsors. And when we come back, Kira Wiggins, San Joaquin Community Hospital, is going to talk about some superfoods that can help you fight cancer. Stay with us. We'll be right back.